How concerned should we be with Isaac Wilson's performance last Thursday? And should Dijon Stanley be moved all the way up to RB1? All that and more coming up on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network and available wherever you get your podcasts or on YouTube. If this is your first time tuning in, make sure you like and subscribe. Love interacting with all of you in the YouTube comments as well as on social media, where you can follow our show on X at Locked On Utes. If you are in the market for a second listen today, recommend you check out Locked On College Football or Locked On Big 12 for all of the latest happening across the sport we love so much that is officially back. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by Ultimate College Football Head Coach. It's a brand new mobile game that is completely free, has no ads, and 100% playable offline. You can use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, to go inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. You can begin your coaching legacy today. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Excited to be joined on today's show by KSL Sports' Alex Napoles. And Alex, we got a lot to run through. Kyle Whittingham in his weekly press conference, so he talked a lot about the things from Thursday's game. So we're going to be focusing on a lot of the things. Like, we've had a chance to sit back, rewatch a lot of the game now, really digest our thoughts from having Utah football back. So everything from quarterback play, running back, offensive line, receivers, usage, everything really about this Utah football team. And then briefly, we'll discuss a little bit about the upcoming Baylor matchup that we have closing in soon. And you were at the Baylor game last year too, so excited to get your thoughts on that Bears team. But I thought we should start with Isaac Wilson, because that was such a hot topic point over the offseason, was who's going to be his team's backup quarterback. Hey, Isaac Wilson looked really good in the spring. Maybe he'd probably win it if it was named today, but that's really far away. Fall camp, a lot of things still to play out. And Isaac Wilson wins it in fall camp. And Cam Rising in the first team offense play so well on Thursday that we see Isaac before halftime. Even he comes in and he struggled that very first drive. It's a tough spot to put him in like that. His first ever college snap, just that step up in Rice-Eccles Stadium, just all the look. Anytime you make your first play like that, there's going to be a lot of pressure and eyeballs on you. And look, I just think it was a thing where Isaac, he had to go out there and experience that. And I think in a lot of ways had to make mistakes. And to answer my question I posed earlier, how concerned as I am, I feel pretty good about Isaac still. I do not think Isaac's going to come in and win on the road at Oklahoma State. I don't think if Isaac Wilson's this team's quarterback in a Big 12 championship game, and even like the Arizona game, like, it's going to be tough. But can Utah win with Isaac Wilson playing? I still think the answer to that question is yes, because what did we see over the course of the game? We saw improvement. We saw some bad interceptions, but the touchdown throw to Caleb Lohner, that's a dime. And there were several other plays throughout the game where I thought he showed growth and improvement. I think this is much more of a case of a guy who came in, had to experience college football, had to fail and learn from it. And now that he did, even over the course of that game, I saw improvement. So I still feel like Utah can do really good things whenever they need, if they ever need to turn to Isaac on the season.
You hit the nail right on the head, JT. There's no need to be concerned. There's no need to worry about Isaac Wilson. Yes, it's unfortunate. I mean, his first ever play at the collegiate level will go down as that sack, and his first drive will end up in an interception. But I mean, Kyle Whittingham said that it probably wasn't the best situation to put him in towards the end of the at the end of the half. He said it wasn't the best situation. Probably should have waited maybe for the start of that second half, but they wanted to put him in a situation where he can run a 2-minute offense, just try to shake off those nerves. And I think that's just what we saw, JT. I think we just saw nerves. I'm not concerned at all about his performance, because like you said, he did kind of grow into the game. He looked a lot better in the second half. I love the touchdown pass. The touchdown pass, I think, was absolutely fantastic. But, you know, I was just having this conversation the other day. I think you have to allow the kid to fail. You have to you have to put him into those situations, because he is a true freshman. He is 18. He just graduated high school. You're throwing him into his first ever college football game. Even though you're at home, even though it is Rice-Eccles Stadium, the whole stadium's looking at you. Everybody knows Isaac Wilson. Even on the national level, everybody knows who Isaac Wilson is. There's a lot of eyes on Isaac, and so you throw him in that situation and allow him to fail and allow him to learn and allow him to grow.
You absolutely allow him to grow. And Another group you're going to have to allow to grow this season is the offensive line. The offensive line was not perfect. The very first play of the game, Spencer Fano gets beat inside. Cam gets hit right away. He has to throw the ball away because he's going to get hit. There was a sack given up, as we mentioned, to over. Kyle Whittingham gave the offensive line in his press conference. He gave him a B+. I think that's probably what they should grade out as. But we're obviously going to be concerned because when you play a team like Southern Utah versus the slate of Big 12 opponents you have coming up, you wanted that to be an A+. But once again, also kind of first game type of things. Caleb Lomu, his first ever collegiate start. Spencer Fano, first time settling back in on the right side in live game action to this new look offensive line with a lot of things being shaken up. So I do think there's a lot of reasons this offensive line will improve. I think, things like, hey, Spencer Fano got beat inside a few times throughout this game. Those are kind of things that I feel like he'll learn from, take going forward and get better. I still have confidence that this offensive line is going to continue to improve because they have young starters over the course of the season. And I mentioned a couple of guys that struggle. I do want to give a lot of credit to Jaron Kump. I thought he was really good last Thursday. And that was a guy I talked about that based on what we saw last season. I had concerns about him being the center, but based on what I saw last week, I feel good about him. I thought Mokofisi was still pretty good. Tongai still getting settled in at left guard, but the offensive line is another position that I feel like will continue to grow with time. And I even expect them to take a step forward in play as the competition steps up this week in the Baylor Bears.
Absolutely. You just got to give them a little bit of time to gel, a little bit of time to get that cohesiveness. I mean, you can obviously build that in fall camp and throughout the summer, but it's just not the same, I don't think, until you actually face game time situations, until you face opponents. And it'll take a minute for them to kind of gel together and build up what we anticipate this O-line to be. I think a B+ is a fair assessment from Kyle Whittingham. I think it's a good assessment, and obviously there's room for improvement, but I do think that this O-line will come around. And once it does, I think the running game will come along with it as well.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the running back room shortly, but before we get that, we do have to discuss some of the injuries that were disclosed by Kyle Whittingham. Unfortunately, Kenan Johnson, it is a season-ending injury, and it's just a heartbreaker for a guy who came over to Utah, wanted to have one really good final season, win a lot of games, then go off to try to hear his name called in the NFL draft. Now, Kyle Whittingham did mention he will probably slam dunk to get a medical red shirt, so hopefully it all works out there, but you just hate to see it happen to a guy who came in, was going to be a huge part of this team. So he's done for the season. Aliki Vaimahi is not done for the season, so a little bit of good news there. Still sucks we don't know when he's going to be back, but 2 losses for this Utah team. The defensive tackle room is still incredibly deep for Utah. They will miss Vaimahi. He was their 3rd best defensive tackle, at least based on what Utah showed last week. But Junior Tafuna and Keanu Tanuvasa, for my money, is probably the best defensive tackle duo in the Big 12, especially with how good Tanuvasa looked last week. He looks like he's just taken another step forward. Dallas Vaki came in, and he looked fantastic. I'm still waiting to see the Samote Pepas. David Fotu's another guy that can contribute. This Utah team just always has good defensive tackle play. And yeah, I think Kennan's a bigger loss probably on the outside just because of the difference you feel in the depth out there. But Smith Snowden looked really good. That's a guy Kyle Whittingham said maybe we'll play him outside more. Scooby Davis is a guy they really liked a lot of what they saw from him last week. Cam Calhoun turned a lot of heads during camp too. So this is still a Utah defensive backfield. Kyle Whittingham mentioned after the game on Thursday that they also were thinking about moving Teo Johnson back down to be that kind of nickel corner because they have guys like Gilman and Nate Ritchie at safety. So once the cornerback position is another area where I'm like, okay, the Johnson loss is a big loss for this team, but they still have the bodies there to be able to navigate that loss and have it not derail their season.
Yeah, when it comes to the defensive tackle depth, I don't think there's much concern there. I think that it's a very deep room, and someone's gonna step up while Vimahi's out. But when it comes to Kenan Johnson, I think we're having a completely different conversation because we heard a lot of positives, so many positives about Kenan Johnson when he transferred over throughout fall camp and throughout spring camp as well. There was a lot of chatter and a lot of talk about how impressive Johnson had been. I was super excited to see him and Zamaya Vaughn out on the outside together. I thought that was going to be a really, really good cornerback combo in the Big 12. However, now we can't see that, obviously, because of the unfortunate injury. When it comes to who's going to step up, I absolutely think all the attention turns to a guy like Smith Snowden, who we're very familiar with, JT. We saw him play a lot at Skyridge. Absolutely phenomenal athlete. And so I think I think a lot of heads will turn to him, but I think a lot of people will be surprised by Cam Calhoun as well. It's unfortunate that he wasn't able to go through fall camp because he'd been dealing with injury issues, but now he is back. He is available. He's going to be integrated into the group this week per Whittingham. So it'll be interesting to kind of see what Cam Calhoun does. And I think it's a big chance for a guy like Calhoun, who's coming in as a transfer from Michigan, to kind of take over that opportunity to be the guy alongside Zamiah Vaughn.
It is exciting to see who steps up. Speaking of stepping up, Dijon Stanley did that last week, and he led this team in rushing and receiving yards. When you do that from the running back position, does that mean he should now be Utah's running back one? That's what we are going to be talking about in one moment. But first, want to take an opportunity to tell you all about our friends at Ultimate College Football Head Coach. This is the new mobile game that allows all of you guys to get in and on the action and take over your own college football program. Because with Ultimate College Football Head Coach, it's an amazing game that in simulation where you get to step into the shoes of a head coach and lead your college football program to glory. Can you imagine actually being the coach of the Utah Utes? From recruiting players and hiring coaching staff to overseeing training camps and handling school scholarships, you control every crucial detail of your program. It's all in your hands. Will you be able to handle the pressure? And here's what I really love about this game. You are responsible for calling the offensive plays during the game. So your strategy will not only determine the success of your football season, but will shape the future legacy of your program. Been screaming at the TV about, I wouldn't have called this play. I could do better than that. Well, this is your opportunity to, because you can get Ultimate College Football Head Coach. It's completely free, has no ads, and 100% playable offline. You can play on the go as you want, when you want to. And of course, we have a special offer because you can go to Locked On. You can go over to and download Ultimate College Football Head Coach and use my promo code Locked On CFB, all caps, no spaces, to get inside the game store to receive a free boost to start your program. You can make sure to take advantage of this perk and get your team off to that strong advantage. To download the game, just visit ultimate-cfb.com, ultimate-cfb.com, or look it up in the App Store. Ultimate College Football Head Coach. Begin your coaching legacy today. Also, I want to remind you all about something fun we have going on at the Locked On Network, and that is just the fact that we have college football back. And because we have college football back, that means we have our live season previews at 7 p.m. ET that will be going up for the Locked On channel. They'll be streaming 24/7. This 4-part series covers each of the 4 major conferences with discussions on the ACC, Big 10, Big 12, and SEC, and teams who have a shot at the expanded playoffs. So make sure you guys check it out. You can stream it on Locked On College 24/7 YouTube channel or on the Amazon Fire TV, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Alex, I mentioned it. Dijon Stanley, it was simply put spectacular. 6 carries for 34 yards, 3 receptions for 150 yards. Some of you may be thinking he only had the 2 wheel routes. Well, the second play of the game, when Cam catches it and just kind of tosses that pass in front of him, the ball in front of him, even though it's more like a handoff, it counts as a pass. So he then turns the corner on the edge. That is a pass still, even though it looks more like an end around. But this is the play right there where you see Stanley still catching the ball. So counts to his receiving stats. So should he be RB1? No, he shouldn't be, because I don't think because of his size, he's built for play in, play out, the physicality between the tackles. But he absolutely has to see more time because he's the fastest player on this team right now, at least that I've seen, especially on the offensive side, because that when you have speed to that level, Alex, you just have to get opportunities. And that speed is so devastating that pre-snap Cam Rising realizes, okay, Southern Utah is not aligned correctly. Stanley's going to be open right away. So because of his speed around the edges too, and his quickness overall, he has to see more opportunities. I understand that the other 3 guys might be better between the tackles, but as a third down back to supplement Mekhi Bernard, as well as just in general, like, you have to use him more, even if he's a decoy, because the defenses are going to be paying new attention every time Stanley's on the field now.
You remember last season when Sione Vaki was stepped in and kind of had that opportunity. I'm seeing a little bit of a similarity in those packages, right? Where he can come in, he kind of be a Swiss Army knife for you. He can catch, he can run, he has the athleticism and the IQ to be very good in both situations. And so Dijon Stanley packages, I really hope will continue, because I think they can bring Utah a lot of success. But I don't necessarily think he is RB1 yet. Still has a lot of way to go as far as developing. Still has a lot of ways to go as far as physicality, maybe. But I mean, Dijon Stanley, he can be your Swiss Army knife coming out of the backfield for sure.
I feel so good about this running back room. I know there is not a elite college running back in this room. I think Mekhi Bernard's really good. I think Mike Mitchell's very good. I just don't want him to fumble. He had that little fumble scare, but he got it back. I think Jalen Glover's another guy who's tough, and Stanley with the speed he provides. These are all really good running backs that if the offensive line executes, will do their job. I don't know how consistently these guys are going to break the tackle and then take it to the house, but long drives keep the chains moving. I absolutely believe all of these guys are capable of doing that. I'd still probably have it right now go Mekhi Bernard. I'd maybe have Jalen Glover too after what we saw just with the Mike Mitchell fumble, but Mike looked really good too. And then Stanley in those packages, as I mentioned, I'm so much more infatuated with his skills as that kind of gadget guy that you use around the edges more than between the tackles. But this feels like a lot of really good options for Utah in the running back room. There's been a lot made of not having a guy. I think Utah's totally fine not having a guy because they have a lot of quality players.
Absolutely. You look at each, I think each guy brings their own individual kind of unique skill set to that running backs to the running back room, and Utah can very well utilize those different skill sets in different situations. I do think eventually, as we get down the road and into the season, into the thick of things, I do think one of them will emerge. I'm not sure who yet, but one of them will emerge as that guy, as the undisputed RB1. Could it be a Mike Mitchell? Could it be a Dijon Stanley? Sure. It's gonna fall. We need those guys to step up. We need the young guys to step up and really take advantage of this running back by committee that Utah's kind of approaching, and take those opportunities to learn in game, get those reps, get that experience, and hopefully take this running back room on their shoulders.
Yeah, it'll be exciting to see who of that group does step up. And, you know, one thing a lot of people were hoping to see step up even in just the first game was the wide receiver group. And yes, Dorian Singer had 2 nice catches and was actually looked at. I talked about it on yesterday on Drake Toll that a lot of the times when Cam Rising actually went elsewhere with the ball, you see him looking at Dorian Singer first. So I do feel like that Singer's a guy who's going to continue to produce for this team. But the wide receivers and the other tight ends outside of Brant didn't pop as much as maybe we thought they would. Well, but that's just also part of the anomaly of what Dijon Stanley was able to do, right? Like, we're not going to see these massive wheel routes go for these huge game-changing touchdowns again. I feel very confident that when I say Dijon Stanley had a season high in receiving yards, that I don't expect him to do that again. Does he maybe break free for one of those in a game? Sure. But teams are going to be very aware of him now, so it'll be hard to do that. But Kyle Whittingham talked about, look, there's going to be some weeks the wide receivers eat. There's going to be some weeks the tight ends go off. And this Utah team just has so many different packages. I remember watching the game live. I was like, why aren't we seeing Landon King earlier? There was a key third down where Landon King got in the game early. He just didn't get the ball. I think same thing with Damian Alford. I do believe I saw him. We're going to see once the Utah athletic staff, they do track the who participates in these games. So we're going to get to see that eventually. But I'm pretty sure he was out there too. We saw Caleb Lohner. We saw Dallin Bentley as well. Micah Pittman nearly brought in a couple of big passes in this one. Cam just over missed him too. So I still feel good about this weapons room that Utah has, because Utah didn't struggle to move the ball in this game. That's the thing. Everyone was like, some people are like, I want to see this guy get the ball and that guy move the ball. But at the end of the day, Utah moved the ball. So yes, I want to see these other pieces involved too, but I think they're going to be at different points in the season. There's just going to be a lot of weeks where, yes, Brant Kuithe, Dorian Singer, they will be the constants. There's going to be a lot of weeks where one guy's going to go off and then the next guy's going to go off, because it's a deep room.
I think Utah has to figure out it's a deep room on both the wide receiver and the tight end room. So I think Utah's going to have to figure out that balance of maybe, sharing the ball, distributing the ball to the different positions. Obviously, Whittingham said it's going to be a week by week thing, depending on schemes and opponents, on who will probably see the ball a little bit more between the receivers and the tight ends. But I think if Utah can really nail down that balance, I think the passing game is going to be fine. I also do think that because Brant Kuithe got so many chunk plays, because Dijon Stanley obviously had the 2 big chunk plays, and because the first team offense really didn't play the entire first half anyway, it's a little hard to kind of gauge where that passing game is per se. When you look at a guy like Singer, like Alford, who necessarily weren't involved in the game, and I think it just comes down to getting those big chunk plays and pulling your first team by the half.
No, I think you're
Obviously this week against Baylor, it's going to be a different story, just like Whittingham said. But yeah, I'm not concerned about the production just quite yet.
Yeah, I'm not concerned either. I'm excited to see the difference in the Baylor game. Utah's a big favor over Baylor right now. So that's something that we are going to be talking about here is this Baylor team. Hey, how different are they than the team that we saw Utah beat last year, where it was Mikey Matthews and Nate Johnson and Pete just piecing together what Utah could offensively and, the Baylor actually ran on Utah okay in the first half, and then Utah completely shut down their rushing attack in the second. So what kind of a game is it shaping up to be in Salt Lake City this week? That's what we got to discuss in one moment. But first, we got to talk with you all about one of the sponsors of today's episode of Locked On Utes, our friends at 5 Hour Energy. I don't know about you guys, but after lunch, I get tired. And I'm sure you guys, those of you who have big Labor Day plans, I'm sure you had this point too, where it's like you're having a blast with the family, but at some point you get tired. And especially when you're back from this long 3-day weekend, you're going to get tired tomorrow. And that's where 5 Hour Energy can be there for you, because you're not alone when you get tired. In fact, research shows that more than 70% of us hit a wall after lunch. You can let 5 Hour Energy shot help you leap over that wall instead of crashing into it. 5 Hour Energy has so many fantastic things I love about it, because it's a brand of hardworking people that people like you have trusted for over 20 years to give them alert, energizing energy that feeding them to help them get through the day, those busy and hectic schedule. You always know where to find 5 Hour Energy shots, right at the cash register at nearly every convenience drugstore and grocery store nationwide. You can stack up on money-saving multi-packs to make sure you never run out of delicious 5 Hour Energy shots, and there are tons of flavors available online as well. Speaking of online, you can go to 5hourenergy.com. That's the number 5, not it's spelled out, but the number 5 Hour Energy to get in on their products today. You can use my promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on the order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. You can go to 5hourenergy.com today to get an energy boost back. Alex Napoles closing it out with me here. And as we get gear up for Utah to take on Baylor, two final things I want to say on real quick. Number one, congrats to Chris Curry being on this Utah staff. Love seeing a former player who never really was able to get his opportunity because of all the injuries he encountered. Love to see him as a staff and a coach on this team. And then also just about Cam Rising, and Kyle Whittingham was asked about like, hey, you weren't happy with how much he ran a lot. And he said, you know what? Cam did a pretty good job taking care of himself. I obviously got nervous as well when Cam took off a few times. I just want Cam to slide more. I want him to go down before he gets hit more. But I also understand he's just a competitive guy. He's fighting for every yard when he's out there. It's a lot easy for us to sit back, not in the thick of danger, not fighting for what's best for our team, doing everything we can to win, because we've done everything to try and get back on that field, which is what Cam Rising has. It's a lot easier for us to sit back and say, like, don't take the hit, do this, do that, than it is for Cam. So I agree with Coach Whitt. I want him to be a little smarter on some of those, but running is just who he is, and you can't take that part out of Cam Rising's game because it's just who he is.
It's his competitive nature. That's what Whittingham said, and he's not going to be afraid. I thought it was going to be important for him to kind of go out and maybe take those hits and maybe run a little bit to shake off those nerves. But honestly, JT, he didn't look nervous at all. I thought his mentality came in coming into that game against SU. It seemed like Cam Rising was just Cam Rising. The same Cam Rising that we saw back in 2022 is the same one we're going to see this season, and I love to see that.
And speaking of things returning, this Baylor team has a lot back. They have some new pieces. DeQuan Finn, we talked about. He's a guy who did a lot of things, MAC Player of the Year. And in the game against Tarleton, he looked pretty good overall, right? 14 for 22, 192 yards, 2 touchdowns, but also 2 interceptions. And especially the first one was not pretty. So this is still a Baylor team. They don't have a back either. They have a lot of solid players, but the offensive line is still a work in progress. Receivers, good players, guys who can make a big play and turn the tail of a game, but I don't think anyone who's on Dorian Singer's level even. Front seven doesn't generate much of a pass rush, and this secondary got gashed a lot last year. I don't have a lot of confidence in this Baylor team coming in and knocking off Utah. I know you were at the game last year and you saw a lot of this Baylor team's shortcomings in person. What are your expectations when this Baylor team makes their first trip out to Salt Lake City?
Yeah, first of all, McLean Stadium was absolutely phenomenal. I thought it's one of my favorite stadiums that I have visited. Big shout out to Baylor for that environment. It was a fun environment out there. As far as the actual Baylor team goes, last year I think they maybe gave Utah a little bit of a scare. I think that game was probably a lot closer than it should have been. Now, with Baylor coming to Rising Stadium, I think we're getting a different story. I think, being in that environment at McLean, yeah, it was great, but it doesn't compare to the environment that you get at Rising Stadium. And I think Utah's just going to ride that home crowd, and maybe I think they're going to out physical Baylor. Baylor is not a team that stands out to me to be very physical this year, and so I think Utah's just going to be Utah. And they're going to out physical that front line, and they're going to do what Utah does, and they're going to be just kind of punch Baylor in the mouth and out physical Baylor here at home.
Yep, I feel like that's what Utah is going to be able to do as well. I apologize if there's any Florida State fans for some reason and listening to this and you're hearing about physicality because you've now watched your team get bullied 2 weeks in a row by lower tier ACC teams. But that'll be what Utah is looking to avoid this weekend. I'm sorry, Florida State fans. I'm sure there's none of you even listening at this point, but I still can't believe what's going on with the Seminoles. And I talked about it a few weeks back, last week actually, after their game, that this is why games aren't played on paper. We rely so much on, they filled all these needs in the transfer portal. So much different watching them come together. We felt good about this Utah team because the continuity, the players they had back that have been successful with this Utah program. That's what it feels like it's going to be. Another chance to do it. And your first statement game if you're Utah against a Big 12 opponent, I know it's a non-conference game, but still the first chance to make a statement. And Alex, for you this week, what do you think its score is going to be? You think Utah's making that statement?
I do believe Utah comes out and makes that statement. Again, I like Utah at home. I favor this Utes team at Rising Stadium. As far as score predictions,
line was 14 last I saw, or maybe it was 15. It was at 17, then moved to 15 earlier.
I'm gonna go 31-17 Utah. How about
31 to 17? I like it.
31-17.
I would love to see it. I think Utah's got a chance to really give it to Baylor too. I'll be giving my score prediction later in the week. But Alex, for people who want to check out more of your work, including some exciting things you're doing on Fridays and Saturdays, where should they head over to?
Yeah, absolutely. So head over. My @ is just right there, right under the name as always. Go follow @NapolisAlex on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. There, all the news going on with KSL Sports, covering all the local teams, your favorites, the Jazz, the Utes, the soccer teams, and so everything that you got going on, we got at KSL Sports. So make sure to go follow. And yeah,
appreciate you stopping by, Alex. Thanks again.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me on. As always a great time.
That's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Utes. We got a preview Baylor on tomorrow's show. I'll be diving into the tape, what I see about this Baylor's team, some of the Tarleton stuff, as well as some of the things we heard about them coming into the season, because when you play an FCS opponent, there's only so many things you can take. Same thing that we've talked about for this Utah team with what they have shown. So we'll be breaking down that and so much more as Utah gears up for a big test against a Big 12 opponent. That's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Utes. If you're in the market for that second listen, Locked On College Football has your back, and we will be back with you tomorrow.